Good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our second virtual open house for the Eversource Energy Western Mass Natural Gas Reliability Project. We'll give it another minute or two to have more participants join us, and then we'll get things started with a few announcements. So please stand by.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos y gracias por sumarse a esta segunda reunión virtual del proyecto de fiabilidad de Western Massachusetts en este Open House. Vamos a esperar un par de minutos más para que sigan sumándose los participantes, así que les pedimos paciencia antes de pasar a hacer otros anuncios. Muchas gracias.
And those of you who are just joining us, we're waiting a few more moments for other people to arrive. But welcome to our second open house of the Western Massachusetts Natural Gas Reliability Project. We'll be with you in just a moment. Thank you.
Para los que acaban de sumarse en este instante, vuelvo a darles la bienvenida a esta segunda reunión virtual en una casa abierta o open house del proyecto de fiabilidad Western Massachusetts. En unos instantes estaremos con ustedes. Muchas gracias.
Again, thank you for joining us. A few announcements. First, this meeting is being recorded. Spanish translation of today's presentation will be available by clicking the globe symbol below. Once selected, click on Spanish and click Mute Original Audio. I'm going to ask our interpreter's help by making this announcement in Spanish.
Nuevamente, bienvenidos y gracias por acompañarnos. Antes de comenzar, haré unos anuncios. En primer lugar, está grabándose esta reunión. Hay interpretación disponible en idioma español de la presentación de hoy. Y simplemente tienen que hacer clic en el globo o en el icono del mundo que aparece en la parte inferior de la pantalla. También tienen que hacer clic en silenciar el audio original y seleccionar español. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. The pace at which I'm speaking is intentional to allow time for our translation services to follow the presentation. This afternoon's meeting's format is being hosted in Zoom webinar. It is unfortunate we cannot meet in person due to the continued impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, this format allows us to connect with a large audience, share content, and provide interpretation options. As an attendee, you can view the upcoming presentation. Our project team can see your name as an attendee, and you can interact by asking questions or providing comments via chat. We will take all questions and comments for our subject matter experts to address using the chat function following the presentation. As you listen to the presentation, please feel free to enter questions into the chat at any time, and we can address them at the end of the presentation. We have a large number of participants, and we ask that you keep your comments and questions brief, so all participants who want to be heard will have the opportunity. We have a finite period of time this afternoon, and we want to get to as many people as possible. The purpose of this open house is for Eversource to share with you the reason for proposing this important project. We also want to present the scope and to get your feedback. This open house is just the first step in a very involved process associated with a project of this size. After we present the project to you and gather feedback, we will be incorporating that feedback into our filing with the Energy Facilities Siting Board, or EFSB. During the EFSB process, there will be additional opportunity for the public to weigh in on the project. My name is Joe Mitchell, and I am a community relations specialist with Eversource. With me this afternoon are other members of the project team and subject matter experts to answer your questions. Those who are going to be helping me this afternoon are Richard Salvarezza, our project manager, Mark Gonzalez, General Manager for Eversource Gas of Massachusetts, Chris Luca from Project Management, Ryan Barnes from Engineering, Matt Waldrop is in our Licensing and Permitting Department, Jeff Brandt is an Eversource contractor from TRC, Nikki Bruno from our Clean Technologies Division, Shayla Collins from Regulatory, and Chuck Burnham is our specialist from Project Services and will facilitate the question and answer period. The following are the topics I'll be presenting this afternoon. Project need. As I said, this is a reliability project. Eversource's mission is to provide the safe, reliable delivery of our energy products. We are hoping at the conclusion of this briefing, you will see that we are trying to mitigate a reliability risk to 58,000 existing customers in the greater Springfield area, with more than 33,000 of them located right in the city of Springfield. We will discuss the project scope, routing analysis, alternatives that were examined, and potential routes for the proposed project. We will describe the joint effort with the Tennessee Gas Pipeline Company, or TGP, for the Longmeadow Point of Delivery Site, or POD. We will discuss safety topics, the regulatory approval process, and the approvals that are needed at the state and local level, in addition to EFSB approval. We will touch on the project schedule, the community outreach that has been conducted thus far, and the continued communications. And lastly, there is a slide that contains the team's contact information and address of the project's website, and we will open it up for questions at the very end. The project need. On this slide, you can see the orange shaded area that indicates the 58,000 customers that are fed by the single source of natural gas from the TGP's gas transportation system. I'm hoping you can see my cursor here along the green line on the slide. This green line is a simplified depiction of TGP's transmission infrastructure. It is more complex than this single green line and has redundancies built in. The natural gas travels from west to east, and as a transmission system, it is made up of large diameter piping, high pressures, and transports large volumes of gas across great distances. The green transmission line travels north to Eversource's Agawam Gate Station, or POD. It is located at the top of Springfield Street near Dave's Soda and Pets. At this point, Eversource takes ownership of the product, and using our distribution network, annotated as a blue line on this map, and we bring our gas down Memorial Avenue, across the Memorial Bridge, and deliver it to our Bliss Street regulator station. The Bliss Street regulator station is located near the old Basketball Hall of Fame. From here, Eversource distributes gas to 40,000 customers on the east side of the Connecticut River, including those in Springfield, Chicopee, East Longmeadow, and Longmeadow. Should there be a failure of our system near the Memorial Bridge, these 40,000 customers, indicated by the orange shading, would experience a service interruption. If there should be a failure in the vicinity of the Agawam Gate Station, 18,000 customers in West Springfield, Agawam, and Southwick would be without natural gas, in addition to the 40,000 customers on the east side of the river. As many of you are aware, Eversource acquired the assets of Columbia Gas last year. This project is something Columbia recognized a need for and made a level of progress in advancing through the years. The potential risk was highlighted during the tornado event of 2011, where images were captured via video camera of a tornado touching down very close to the gas infrastructure on the west side of the Memorial Bridge. Upon acquisition of Columbia's assets, Eversource immediately identified the importance of mitigating the risk to the Springfield community and fast-tracked this reliability project. At Eversource and all utilities, both gas and electric, we like to have contingencies and reliability built into our systems to strengthen them to ensure the safe, reliable delivery of our energy products. There may be smaller subdivisions and pockets where a single supply is acceptable, but large groups of customers and infrastructure conditions such as this warrant a robust level of resiliency. With 7 towns at potential risk, including residents, businesses, hospitals, schools, universities, and major municipal facilities, it is our intent to close the loop. We want to bring a second independent source of supply to our existing customers. Our proposed project, Our proposed project would connect our Bliss Street station to a new point of delivery at the southern border of Longmeadow. Should there be an issue at the Memorial Bridge, the 40,000 customers on the east side of the Connecticut River would be fed by this new source and not have their gas interrupted. Should there be a failure at the Agawam Gate Station, our product could be backfed through our new independent line across the Memorial Bridge and to the Agawam Gate Station. This would spare the 18,000 customers in these communities on the west side of the Connecticut River from a service interruption. This is about the reliability of our distribution network serving 58,000 current customers. It is not an expansion of service to new customers. The project is designed to strengthen our existing distribution network by providing a second source and close the loop in the existing distribution system. This will increase reliability and better allow the company to conduct scheduled maintenance and replace leak-prone pipe. The risk we are trying to mitigate is to all 58,000 customers if there should be an interruption associated with the Agawam point of delivery, or the 40,000 customers in Springfield area if there were an issue in the vicinity of the Memorial Bridge. In an environmental justice community such as Springfield, the impacts of an interruption of service are felt more acutely. And unlike an electrical outage, the duration of a natural gas service interruption is significantly longer due to the nature of the product and the steps necessary to make the system safe. In a gas interruption, it is necessary to shut off the system at every customer's meter, in addition to other system cutoffs. Additionally, after repairs are made to resolve the cause of the outage, valves are opened in segments, which include customer shutoffs. Safety checks are conducted, and pilots are relit. Entry into people's residences and businesses is required to accomplish this very time-consuming restoration process. The services of locksmiths and law enforcement are often required in this complex process. If there were an issue to the distribution system originating at or near the Agawam gate station due to mechanical failure, natural disaster, or third-party damage, it could have an unprecedented impact on the community. In such an event, Eversource would stand up its incident command system and would likely draw on the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, or MEMA, and the National Guard for resources and assistance. Temporary shelters would be established, and depending on the severity of the outage, some of those shelters could be a significant distance from the Springfield area. We would call on other utilities nationwide for mutual aid. Making the system safe is a time-consuming process, especially with a high number of meter sets located inside of dwellings in this area. Assistance from locksmiths and law enforcement would be required. Once repairs to the system are made, the process to restore service to customers is an even more complex and time-consuming one. Gas infrastructure is restored in segments, safety checks are accomplished, and pilot lights are relit in every residence and business. If an extended outage were to occur in winter months, the impacts to the community and cost could rise exponentially with the effects of freezing pipes and other weather-related damage. Due to the precautions utility companies take, large-scale natural gas outages are rare, but not unheard of. The customers of another natural gas utility in New England experienced a service outage in January of 2019 that impacted over 7,400 residents and businesses at the height of winter. Due to a complex series of events, gas service was interrupted. The restoration of the distribution network required a significant mutual aid effort and 7 days to complete with the help of 1,000 responders. To solve the issue of a single supply to the region, Eversource proposes the following. 1, assist Tennessee Gas Pipeline in the construction of their proposed point of delivery site in Longmeadow. Install a new pipeline to transport natural gas from the TGP point of delivery station to our existing Bliss Street regulator station in Springfield. we will make improvements and upgrades to our Bliss Street station. We will also replace certain segments of existing pipe infrastructure that are co-located with the intended route of the new independent source of supply. In order to connect the proposed point of delivery site on Hazardville Road in Longmeadow to our existing regulator station on Bliss Street in Springfield, the project team examined several potential routing options. Routing options were analyzed based on an extensive regulatory precedent, environmental, community impacts, reliability, and cost, something the EFSB takes into consideration, were all factored in our analysis. Our analysis continues as this open house is part of the process in seeking community feedback on routing options. In addition to pipeline solutions to the existing reliability concern, we also looked at several non-pipeline alternatives. They are energy efficiency, demand response, electrification, and geothermal. Unfortunately, these are conceptual alternatives that do not meet the current urgent need of reliability to our existing customers. Eversource cannot call upon energy efficiency resources to meet its load planning requirements. Unlike gas supply resources, energy efficiency resources cannot be dispatched to meet load. In order for load response to be effective, there has to be a firm, large quantity natural gas resource that a customer is willing to forego. Such scenarios do not exist in New England, and particularly in this service territory. Electrification. Eversource Energy is ready, willing, and able to contribute to achievement of these ambitious carbon reductions. Eversource Energy has already committed to achieve carbon neutrality in our operations by 2030, investing in clean energy and helping customers and the region reduce carbon emissions to secure a clean energy future. Geothermal. Eversource Gas of Massachusetts does not have a department-approved geothermal program. Even if it did, like the other alternatives considered, such a program could help reduce demand for natural gas in the greater Springfield area, but it could not replicate the timing, gas supply reliability, or cost of the project. Additional point of delivery locations and routing options were looked at, but due to environmental concerns, length of routing, and cost, the proposed location in Longmeadow was determined to be the most reliable, consistent with the minimization of environmental impacts and cost. After extensive analysis, the project team has come up with essentially 4 routes, which I'll describe. But just a note about terminology. As you can see on the map, we refer to one route as the preferred route and others as variations or alternatives. This is because, based on our current analysis, that preferred route scores best, but several of the options score similarly. We are looking for your feedback and thoughts and local knowledge on these routes. We want to understand what you consider to be problems, concerns, mitigation you would like to see. And then the team will go back over our route selection scoring analysis to make sure that it appropriately reflects what we hear today. So these routes are not final, and our analysis is still ongoing. I will go over these routes using the map on the slide. We are aware it does not possess the greatest level of detail. However, a detailed depiction of the routes, due to its elongated shape, does not fit on the PowerPoint slide. I will share a detailed slide with you in just a few moments, and be aware This high-resolution slide is available on the project website that you can download and review at your convenience. And if you look at my cursor, the preferred route, this is the west route, that follows Interstate 91 and is annotated on the map in solid purple. It travels from the POD on Shaker Road, it travels from the POD north on Shaker, which becomes Laurel. It turns west on Converse, travels north on Longmeadow Street, goes under the Longmeadow curve, up the entrance ramp to Long Hill Street, and then down East Columbus to our POD, to our regulator station. Preferred route variation 1. This is similar to the preferred route and annotated on the map as dotted orange. Like the preferred route, it travels north on Shaker, but then it travels west on William Street before traveling north on Longmeadow Street. Similar to the preferred route, it will follow the Longmeadow curve, Long Hill, and East Columbus. Preferred route variation 2. This is known as the Forest Park route and is annotated as dotted red. It travels north on Shaker, becomes Laurel, west on Forest Glen Road, into Forest Park on Magawiska, and exits the park on Long Hill and follows Long Hill to East Columbus. Noticed alternative. This is known as the Eastern route and is shown as dotted green on the map. Like other routes, it travels north on Shaker, which becomes Laurel. Comes Laurel. It travels east on Converse, north on Dickinson, and west on Sumner Ave. It continues to Long Hill Street and East Columbus. It's important to note that all proposed routes are located within the roadway. This is a map of greater detail. As you can see from its elongated shape, it does not fit well in the slideshow presentation. I will zoom in now and go over these routes. Please note that the coloring on this map is different than the one on the previous slide. But you can see a greater detail of the preferred route, the variations, and the noticed alternative. And again, this is on our website, which I'll give you the link to at the end of this presentation. Sorry for the delay. Proposed point of delivery. The point of delivery is where the natural gas is transferred from TGP's transmission system to Eversource's distribution system. It is our desire to have the POD as unobtrusive as possible. All infrastructure will be contained indoors. The proposed buildings will be designed to match the existing Longmeadow Country Club building nearby. Noise reduction, construction methods, and materials will be used. It is proposed to have 5 buildings located on the approximately 2.5-acre site. 2 of the buildings will belong to TGP and 3 will belong to Eversource. The equipment inside the buildings will be used for pressure control, metering, heating, odorization, fire protection, security, and telemetry. Here you can see some design concepts for the exterior of the proposed buildings. Again, the purpose is to match the existing structure. We want to be a good neighbor. The safe and reliable delivery of our energy products is the primary mission at Eversource. The point of delivery facility and the entire project will employ all of the latest technologies with an eye on safety. Alarms, telemetry, on-site visits, and corrosion protection are just a few of the safety measures to be engaged. The individual who has been responsible for safety training in the region for the last several years is our Senior Specialist for Gas Emergency Preparedness, Eric Madison. Eric was a firefighter for 35 years, serving 30 of them right here in Longmeadow. He was chief of the Longmeadow Fire Department for 15 years. Eric knows the natural gas delivery infrastructure and is also intimately familiar with firefighting response and procedures. He is uniquely qualified to enhance safety through first responder training for all aspects of the proposed project. This slide provides an outline of the EFSB regulatory process. We are seeking your input now prior to filing this project with the EFSB. During the elaborate EFSB process, there are opportunities for interested entities and persons to participate in a variety of ways and make your voices heard. This is a busy slide. The point that this slide makes, very clearly, I believe, is there are a number of state and local agencies that approvals and permits may be required. The EFSB is just the first step. This too is a busy slide. Detailed here are estimated dates and are subject to change. The main point here is the EFSB process can take 2 or more years. In a best case scenario, construction activities would not start until late 2023. To gain input, we needed to inform members of the public about the project. As details of the project have become clearer, we have shared with municipal officials and bodies, just as we are doing here now. We will continue to do so. We have used the media in the region along with the U.S. Postal Service and door knockers for abutters to notify the public about these open houses. We have a website that contains the most up-to-date information regarding the project. This slide contains the avenues to gather more information about the project. If you use the camera function on your smartphone and hold it up to the QR code on your screen, you'll be directed to the project's website for more information. This concludes the formal part of our presentation. We will now move on to the question and answer portion of the open house. Please use the chat function to ask any questions you may have regarding the project, and Chuck Burnham from our project services team will moderate. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks everyone for joining us for our afternoon open house. We've received several questions thus far. So as Joe mentioned, I will read the questions aloud and pass it off to other SMEs to respond to as many questions as we can respond to this afternoon. Starting off, we did talk about timing of construction, but there was a question about when construction would start and how long it would take. If I could ask Chris Luca to respond to that. Chris is our manager of project management, and we'll just turn it over to him. And as a just as a process thing, once I ask the question, the SME will turn their camera on and their volume, so as attendees will be seeing the person answering.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. So regarding the question around the timing of the project, and it is subject obviously to the results of the EFSB filing. So the intended schedule at this point is to start the construction in the latter part of 2023. Construction will take approximately 12 months. So that includes the installation of the POD, the upgrades to the Bliss Street Reg Station, along with the pipeline installation. And as you can see up on the screen, the schedule is there. And of course, you know, winter conditions and or weather could certainly impact the schedule. I can grab one other question here regarding the install within roadways. I think that was a question that was asked as well, Chuck. So the installation will be primarily under the road surface. As of now, the preferred route and the noticed alternative routes are exclusively within the roadway. And so at a minimum, they're in the public right of way. And as you can see on the screen, what a typical trench would look like. Crews would excavate for the work to be performed that day. So would impact residents and businesses for approximately a day or two in front of their specific location. The pipeline is installed, backfilled, and temporarily paved each day. We work with the local traffic authorities to ensure that we have the proper traffic control, whether it's detours or uniformed officers directing traffic. And the project itself, once completed, will have a unmanned gate station POD located in Longmeadow that, you know, to answer some of the additional questions that we saw, will be monitored 365 days a year by our gas control folks, who do have the ability to manually, remotely shut down that system. So hopefully that answers the question, Chuck. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Next question, and we had a few variations, questions regarding the Memorial Bridge. Since the existing pipeline through Memorial Bridge and the new pipeline both go through the same Bliss station, essentially, why is the second line needed? I think we need to clarify that. And Rich, I'll ask you to kind of expound on that a bit.
Yeah, so to clarify the question, the concern is that with this project, installing a new second source of supply for the area, would the Bliss Street Station and the Memorial Bridge still pose a risk of a single point of failure? So to address the Bliss Street Station concern specifically, it is correct that both lines, the existing line that travels from west to east from Agawam across the bridge into Springfield and terminates at the Bliss Street Station, as well as the new line that we're installing north through Longmeadow and north through Springfield, also to the Bliss Street Station. It is true that both lines do terminate at the Bliss Street Station, but in order to mitigate the concerns of a single point of failure at that station, there are design considerations and design requirements that the Code of Federal Regulations mandates us to abide by. And most importantly, as it relates to this issue, is facility separation. So we, as we design this station, Eversource would be required to provide adequate facility separation to ensure that no single event would result in a failure at the station. And just to expand on that even more and what that might look like, it is correct that the work we're planning at the Bliss Street Station would be contained within the existing footprint, but some of the strategies we might use, for example, would be installing the new facilities below ground. That's something we'll be evaluating as we approach the design phase.
Okay, got it.
Just to compare with the existing facility is above a grade, and we would be evaluating
Let's go
putting the
down then.
facilities
Okay.
below grade. There are some other options in that we could install hardened structures. These would be potentially steel or concrete structures that would maintain that facility separation to ensure that there's no single point of failure. Thank you for the question. Chuck, was there anything else I needed to cover there?
Not at the moment, but we will circle back. I just wanted to address one other question that came in regarding last night's open house as well as today's. We had a question about the number of attendees. Last night, we had about 70 participants that didn't include the Eversource SMEs. And right now there are 52 attendees currently on the line. And that doesn't include the Eversource SMEs that were responding to questions. The next question, and again, I will call on Rich to respond to this. We received a question about household air quality with natural gas and several additional questions about air quality, both today and last night. So we'd like to address the air quality questions together at this point.
Absolutely. So this is certainly a valid concern. It's understandable to be concerned about the air quality of your community, your home. And we do understand the concerns of air quality, but as it relates to the project specifically, the project is not an expansion project. It's a resiliency project aimed at eliminating a single source of supply and a single potential point of failure. It's targeted at maintaining system reliability to our customers. And what that means is that the project is not an expansion project. So the total amount of gas that we provide to our customers would be unchanged. So that includes cooking load would not be increased in association with this project, and all other heating loads and industrial commercial use would not increase. The project does not provide additional capacity to the system for us to increase customer usage. There is the ability of the company to add customers through our forecast and supply plan that's approved by the DPU. That's in order for the company to maintain or provide additional service connections for new customers. And we evaluate the demand for new additions, and that's approved by the DPU. As a component of that, we have to ensure that the system is capable of taking on that extra load. But to bring it back to this project, that's separate. That's a separate concept. Again, it's a reliability project. It's not related to new load. It's not related to new customers expansion. So thank you for the question. Turn it back to you, Chuck.
Thanks, Rich. We did get another question regarding the statement that the Long Meadow Select Board provided last night. And yes, I will be reading that statement again as part of this open house. But at the moment, we're going to continue to field questions, and then I will read that statement shortly. Next question. I think we had a comment in regards to, Chris, your statement earlier about the control of the POD station, folks working remotely. I think there was a question in regards to their location. If you could just expound on that quickly to respond.
Yeah, sure. I think Chuck, the best probably for this one would be Mark. So I'll give it over to Mark if that's okay.
Thank you, Chris. What was the question again, Chuck?
There's a question about remote operation of the POD station.
Sure. So right now, what we have is we have under TSA with NiSource for our gas control. We are under TSA with them right now. And we are in the process of building our SCADA system now. As you know, this was an asset buy, an asset purchase. So we had a number of transition service agreements to safely transition operations over to Eversource. Dispatch has already come over. We stood that up in June. And the next piece will be gas control, which is now in Ohio. So they are monitoring our systems and controlling our systems, working directly with our team locally. And that will, in Q1 of 2022, that will be the last operational TSA agreement, and we'll be fully on SCADA in Q1 of 2022. Back to you, Chuck.
Great, thank you, Mark. Another question just came in, and I will have Nikki Bruno respond to that one. And we had several variations of this question. What are you doing to prepare for customers transitioning off gas to renewable energy?
Thanks, Chuck. So we're doing a number of different things, but I think probably the most relevant is participating in spearheading really the concerted effort in the future of gas proceeding that the DPU has open. It's of course separate and away from this project, but all 5 Massachusetts-based LDCs are investigating decarbonization alternatives to meet the state mandates of 2050. So we have a consultant actively engaged on providing technical modeling and alternatives. We're also going to be submitting in March a revised business plan for our gas company. So that's underway. And I invite anybody who wants to learn more to visit our proceeding website. It's called thefutureofgas.com. And in the interim, Eversource specifically, as mentioned prior, is working on a 2030 goal of carbon neutrality for our operations. And we're also undertaking a network geothermal pilot in the NSTAR gas service territory to test that technology at utility scale. So we're trying to move alternatives along and learn from pilots and also from the proceeding I mentioned so that we can safely, affordably, and reliably transition customers to meet the state goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Shayla Collins, Regulatory Policy. Thank you for having us today. Also, to support our customers, I encourage folks to take a look at our energy efficiency offerings. We filed a new plan along with the other program administrators at the end of October. That new plan will be in effect from 2022 to 2024. Those plans have probably upwards of $800 million worth of incentives for electrification if customers are interested in that. And also we'll have gas energy efficiency programs that will support the transition to electric heating. So I think that's in response to another question that we had as well.
Okay, the next question, and we've received this a couple times, concerns are some estimates of additional gas customers versus this new construction of pipeline. So we wanted to clarify some questions that folks had regarding the relationship between the proposed construction of this project and estimates on new gas customers that may be joining the system in the future. And I'll ask Richard to respond to that.
Thank you, Chuck. So the customer addition question. Right now, our most recent forecast is that we do anticipate adding 2,500 customers approximately per year moving forward as a component of our forecasted supply plan. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that is a plan that is approved by the Massachusetts DPU. But again, to reiterate the fact that this project is not connected to new customer additions. There is kind of a natural fluctuation of our customer base, which includes new additions, and it also includes customers who move away from natural gas. That's also common. But again, regardless, it doesn't change the focus of the project in terms of our focus on reliability. And we do have an obligation to our existing customers to maintain reliable service throughout the years. So
thanks, Rich. Another question, and we'll have Mark respond to this one. We've questions related to safety and our response. So I'd like to just have Mark address those issues now.
Sure. Thank you, Chuck. And thank you for the question. Yeah, the question was, do we have local technicians responding? And the answer is yes. As I said in the previous question, our dispatch center was stood up in June. So we have an ARCOS call out system. All of our call outs for technicians, whether it be leak related, gate station related, on the system anywhere, are done locally through our ARCOS system, through dispatch. As I said earlier, we are still under TSA agreement with NiSource, watching the remote monitoring and remote control. And as we finish our points to points, those will come over. So we are dispatching locally. That is out of Roosevelt Ave for this district with our technicians, and all supervisors are Massachusetts based, both dispatch and operations. Back to you, Chuck.
Thanks, Mark. We did have another question about the pressure of the line that maybe Rich can respond to. The PSI level, which folks have noted is higher than the current pressure. If we can just elaborate a little on why the pressure is needed.
Sure. So the existing pipelines that we operate typically in our distribution system are significantly lower than the pressure we're proposing for this project. Generally, we see our low pressure mains operate generally less than 1 PSI, right around a half a PSI. And distribution mains can range from that 1 PSI level all the way up to 60 PSI or even 99 PSI. So that's commonplace. It's less commonplace to see pressures upwards of 200 pounds. But the reason why it's required for this project is the existing pipeline in West Springfield that takes gas from Agawam over the Memorial Bridge operates at 260 PSI. So again, the existing line is 260 and our new line is proposed to be 200. And the reason behind that is we have done our system modeling to ensure that the pressure and the size of the pipeline that we're proposing does not exceed what we actually need to provide adequate redundancy. Both pipelines are 16-inch steel pipelines. So this second source of supply would be kind of another 100% capacity line, but at the end of the day, the total amount of gas that we're flowing through both of the lines would be unchanged. In regards to the pressures that customers receive from the pipelines, this is another a valid question. So we would not actually be serving any customers directly connected to this new proposed pipeline. Its only function would be to send gas north to the Bliss Street station. So again, no service lines would be connected from it. I'll turn it back to you, Chuck. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Mark, I think we had a couple acronyms. TSA was one that people may not be familiar with. So let's just make sure we clarify those things for folks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chuck. I apologize. We have too many acronyms. Yeah, what a transition service agreement is, that's what TSA stands for. As I said, this was an asset purchase. So, employees and the assets came with the buy, and things like gas control and dispatch, for example, were under a transition service agreement so that we could safely operate the company while they dispatch for us, which is now in Massachusetts, and while they right now, view our gas control system and operate our gas control system, so that we have a very sophisticated agreement. So we know exactly what the communication protocols are and a plan to get it transitioned over in Q1 of 2022. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Mark. Another question, we've had a few about risk assessment of the Memorial Bridge and the pipeline. Has that taken place, or will that be included in the EFSB filing? Richard, if you could respond to that, or we have others that would can clarify.
Sure. So the question is around, is there or will there be a risk assessment for the pipeline that crosses the Memorial Bridge? And the answer is yes. As a component of the EFSB process, Eversource is required to file with the EFSB a need document. And this is essentially a document that describes the company's need for the project. And the EFSB, being an independent board, will assess the company's need and balance that against the project cost, the environmental and human impacts that the project might have, and eventually come to a decision. So that quantitative risk assessment would be a fundamental component of the EFSB process itself. And just to describe that acronym, just to avoid any confusion, that's the Energy Facilities Siting Board. And that's a state board, Massachusetts State Board.
Thanks, Rich. We did have another question come in, and this will be for you and Mark. The first part, Mark could probably take it. Is the mercaptan used in the odorizing unit in Long Meadow a danger in high concentrations? Mark, if you could respond to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. So the odorization on the MSDS sheet, it is non-toxic. There is some MSDS things that it's an irritant. We obviously do not, want to have high concentrations. So as we put in systems that have very tight fittings, we keep, odors contained in a closed loop system. We have, containment for it. It is inside of a building. So we do, take a lot of precautions to make sure that odors are contained in the closed loop system. In the event that there is, some type of a failure on a fitting or a tank, there are also inside the building containment that allow for us to, quickly respond to that.
Thanks, Mark. And the second part of that question involved pigging, which is another term that I think, Rich, if you can define and then respond to whether or not that's taking place at the POD.
Yeah, so pigging, just to define that term, it's actually another acronym. It stands for pipeline internal gauge. And it's become a term that is used to describe sending a device. It's like a computerized inspection device through the line in order to essentially scan the pipe for any kind of defects. And it's something that's common on the transmission pipelines, the interstate transmission pipelines, but it's not common or required for distribution pipelines. And in fact, the pipeline we're proposing is classified as a distribution pipeline. So there's no requirement that the station support pigging or that the pipeline itself support pigging. And so there will not be a pig launcher. There won't be any pigging capabilities as a component of the project. And just to address another question that came up in regards to emissions associated to the project, which includes the pipeline and the POD. We have evaluated the emissions associated with the project. Certainly the pipeline would be air tested prior to being placed into service, and it would have zero leakage. And that would be verifiable through our pressure testing procedures. But the station itself will also have very little emissions. And Eversource and the design team are going to be evaluating some new technologies, and we're going to be implementing them at this POD. And that includes ventless regulators, so regulators that do not vent as a component of their normal operation, as well as a ventless odorization pump. So these are the kind of the two primary sources of emissions from typical POD installations. Finally, for our POD, there would also be some emissions as a component of regular maintenance, which would generally happen around 2 to 3 times a year. And I did evaluate what these emissions would be equivalent to, and it is equivalent to approximately 1.7 passenger cars per year of methane released due to regular maintenance. We are evaluating some new technologies in regards to venting as well. We're not sure if we're going to be able to implement them or not. It's something we're looking into, and there's a lot of interest at Eversource in starting to use these technologies, but it would essentially be a recaptured device that captures vented natural gas and redistributes it back into the downstream system.
Thanks, Rich. So at this point, I'm going to read the statement from the Long Meadow Select Board. I'll shut my camera off, but it may be a good time, Joe, if you wanted to put the slide up with our contact information, So folks could use this time while they're listening to, if they haven't already, jot down our email and website. We're certainly, actively soliciting input on our routes and the project. So please feel free to call and contact us and reach out. There's also this QR code. Folks can use their cell phone to take a picture of that, and that will send them directly to our website. So at this point, I will read the statement and then we will get back to the Q&A. It was addressed to Joe Mitchell. Thanks to you and your team for hosting this important public forum regarding Eversource's proposed natural gas expansion project, which would originate in Long Meadow and end in Springfield. For the record, my name is Mark Strange, and I am the chair of the Long Meadow Select Board. With your permission, we would like this statement from the Select Board to be read for the open house attendees. Columbia Gas, and now Eversource, states that this project is necessary in the face of an undefined speculative threat of destruction to the existing pipeline located under the Memorial Bridge, which services ratepayers east of the Connecticut River from the Tennessee gas station in Agawam. However, the risk of destruction facing that line has not been quantified. The Long Meadow expansion project is part of a much larger Western Mass project involving Tennessee gas and infrastructure on the west side of the river that had to go through federal permitting. Tennessee Gas has agreed to build a meter station at the Long Meadow Country Club and paid handsomely for the right to do so, based upon the presumption that Columbia Gas, now Eversource, would be able to build this gas expansion line in Long Meadow. Again, the publicly stated reason for this new line is the risk of loss facing the Memorial Bridge line. So what is the measurable and quantifiable risk of loss? Are we talking about a natural gas disaster like the once in a lifetime 2010 tornado? Are we talking about an earthquake, an act of terrorism? Any of these hypothetical events seem highly unlikely to occur. So again, without a risk assessment, we're left with speculation that some event may occur that results in a total loss of the Memorial Bridge pipe and necessitates a new pipeline. The truth is that nothing is broken here that needs to be fixed. Even assuming as a hypothetical that a second line is required, Eversource could achieve the same reliability benefits using other facilities in Long Meadow or develop other strategies that do not require an expensive redundant pipeline to provide additional gas in an emergency. So we would like to see a commissioned report by an independent third-party consultant that both the town and Eversource agree can provide an unbiased evaluation of the risk of loss for the Memorial Bridge line and the Bliss Street point of delivery in Springfield, whose loss would equally impact Eversource's ability to deliver gas to Springfield constituents. In addition to the Select Board, Town Meeting has also expressed its objection to the Long Meadow redundancy line. In 2019, Town Meeting approved a bylaw change which prohibits the use of a meter station in a residential zone. Understanding that Tennessee Gas enjoys federal blanket authority, Town Meeting also passed stringent regulations applicable to the construction of all new natural gas facilities. The select board stands with town meetings opposition. Furthermore, construction and operation of Eversource's new pipeline would require significant town resources, including police, fire, and DPW resources to address construction-related impacts, such as impacts from road closings, traffic disruptions, and noise and dust associated with in-street work. In addition, construction-related activities create a risk of damage to buildings along the route, particularly in the historic district. Further, once constructed, the gate station, located in a residential area of Longmeadow, has the potential to expose nearby residents to methane from the facility. In addition to construction-related impacts, town emergency management officials conservatively estimate that the initial cost of the pipeline expansion to the town would exceed $400,000 plus an additional $250,000 per year for system upgrades and gas detection at Wolf Swamp Road School, which is about 1/3 of a mile from where the meter station would be located. Public safety gas detection equipment, school district communications upgrades, emergency response planning and training, community outreach training, and emergency management support and public health engineering support. The cause for these expenses is the meter station, which involves regulators, fixtures, valves, and above-ground structures that don't currently exist and which create an emergency management risk that otherwise doesn't exist. In addition to its proximity, the Wolf Swamp School, the meter station would be located in a thickly residential neighborhood. Who is going to pay for these additional expenses? The town is on a shoestring budget every year due to its predominantly residential tax base and resulting high property tax rate. We don't have the means to absorb these costs, so the risks to school kids and homeowners created by the meter station risks may have to go unmitigated. In addition to bearing the public health and safety risks and the financial burden, Longmeadow residents would not reap the benefit of the expansion line. The gas from the new pipe will not flow directly into residents' homes and businesses. Many Longmeadow residents served by separate existing facilities in Longmeadow will not see benefits from the new line. In addition, any assumed benefits of increasing reliability will become smaller if, as mandated by the Commonwealth, natural gas use declines. So Longmeadow taxpayers would bear the burden but reap little benefit. Furthermore, a new line at an estimated cost of over $40 million is expensive and will be paid for by ratepayers, including ratepayers in Longmeadow and Springfield. Instead of a new pipeline, these ratepayer funds could be deployed instead to promote energy efficiency and other programs, including smart thermostats, heat pumps, and other technologies that reduce the use of gas in the community, or to repair and replace existing leaky infrastructure. A new pipe is also inconsistent with the Commonwealth's net zero policy, which requires utility companies to reduce and eliminate fossil fuel emissions by 2050. The new pipeline will be in service far longer than the net zero in 2050 as assumed by the new policy. And Eversource has not answered the critical question of this proposed expansion line of how this proposed expansion line is consistent with the Commonwealth's newly passed net zero roadmap legislation. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for the opportunity to speak on this project. We look forward to hosting you and your team at the virtual Long Meadow Select Board meeting on Monday, November 15th at 7 p.m. See you then. That concludes the Long Meadow statement. Joe,
If I may,
absolutely.
just like last night, we want to thank the Long Meadow Select Board for the comments and also for the invitation and opportunity to meet with them next week. Excuse me. And many of the issues that were raised in the letter are addressed in the EFSB process. And we look forward to the citizens of Long Meadow participating in that process, as well as the select board. So, and look forward to discussing it further at the select board meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Joe. The next question we'd like to address is we received several questions regarding cost of the project and how the project would be paid for. Rich, if you could elaborate a little on that and call on others if we need to
Sure.
also to respond. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'll start off by talking about the route selection process, and that'll weave into, I can talk about the costs of each of the proposed routes. And then I can talk about how that would impact our customers as far as rates. So just to talk about the route selection process. In the EFSB process, we are required to evaluate pipeline alternatives as well as non-pipeline alternatives. And non-pipeline alternatives being energy efficiency options and alternative technologies and strategies, all of which we've determined to be insufficient to meet both the timing need and the volume of energy need that this project would satisfy. As far as the pipeline alternatives, we have analyzed quite a few, very many routes in the area, starting with 12 potential routes, and eventually through a ranking system, kind of a statistical analysis of both the human and human impacts, the environmental impacts, and the cost of each route. We've narrowed that down to 4 final routes that we're going to be filing with the EFSB later this year. Yeah, so the figure up on the screen just then was kind of what we call the spaghetti map, which shows the kind of the 12 routes, the universe of routes that we were evaluating, and then the map that we'll show now is kind of the final 4. So I'll go into some details on the final 4 here. Talk about some stats in regards to each one. So the preferred route, this is the route that through our analysis has earned. It is the most favorable route when we combine all of the environmental factors and human impacts and cost. This is a 5.4 mile route. It originates at the proposed POD on Hazardville Road, turns onto Shaker Road and travels north, and Shaker Road eventually becomes Laurel Street. The preferred route turns west onto Converse Street and then turns north onto Long Meadow Street, where we cross the Springfield Long Meadow town line and continue towards the Long Meadow Curve area of I-91, and eventually pass under that Long Meadow Curve area via a directional bore, and we arrive at Long Hill Street, where we travel north, eventually crossing Mill Street onto East Columbus, where eventually we tie to our Bliss Street regulator station. And so that was our preferred route, 5.4 miles. The cost of that route including the POD installation, is $34.7 million. There is a noticed variation, two variations of the preferred route. The first variation is, it follows the same route north on Shaker, but it does turn west on Williams and continues north on Longmeadow Street. And it rejoins the preferred route at the intersection of Converse Street, and all other aspects of that route are the same. And it is the exact same, actually, well, I shouldn't say exact, but nearly the same length, again, 5.4 miles, and it has the same cost of $34.7 million. And just a note on the cost is tied to the install footage of that particular route. And it is an estimate, and we're continually refining the estimate as we move forward into our filing. It is a challenge to accurately estimate the value of a project like this. We're up against some fluctuating steel prices that are a significant factor for our estimate, and we're also attempting to forecast costs a few years into the future. So that was notice variation 1. Notice variation 2 is, again, very similar to the preferred route, travels north on Shaker, north on Laurel, but continues past Converse Street, and in fact travels north through Magawiska, through Forest Park, and joins with Long Hill Street, and then eventually, similar to the other routes, continues onto East Columbus. This route is somewhat shorter at 5 miles, and the cost is also less at $32.5 million. This route it is the least cost option, but it does have some additional environmental and human impacts, given that we are going through the parkland. The final route, this is the 4th route, is the noticed alternative. It's the longest route, significantly longer than the other options. It originates again at the Hazardville Road POD location, travels north on Shaker Road, north on Laurel, but actually this route turns east on Converse Street and continues to the Springfield Longmeadow town line, where it turns north onto Dickinson Street and follows Dickinson Street until we get to the area around the X intersection in the Forest Park neighborhood. We bypass the X intersection via some side streets, and we join with Sumner Ave, and Sumner Ave takes us to Long Hill Street. So this alternative, again, it's the longest alternative, 7.2 miles, and it correspondingly has the highest cost of 44.6 miles. So again, we're analyzing these routes. It's a kind of a statistical approach that combines various impacts, including human impacts, environmental impacts that could be parkland impacts, wetlands, and it also looks at cost. So there's a weighted formula that evaluates the routes, and this is how we've kind of staggered or aligned our preferences. In regards to how this project would be funded, it is correct that it would eventually be funded by customer rates. However, being that we are a regulated public utility, any project costs that are incurred from the project would be subject to an evaluation by the Massachusetts DPU, and the DPU would eventually determine whether or not those costs would be prudent or not. And we have looked into what the approximate impact would be to our customers. And for the average residential customer, the impact is approximately 1% per month, which if we look at the average residential customer, that cost would equal about $1.25 per month increase. Oh, and I did see another question in the chat regarding the evaluation of some routes, some western routes that follow kind of the railroad area, the I-91 area of Longmeadow, and travel north to the Longmeadow Curve area. There was some question of why we weren't analyzing those options, and to answer that, we actually were. There are 3 alternatives that we're looking at or looked at as a component of the 12 initial routes, and those routes were eventually deemed to have a tremendous impact to the environment. There's some conservation areas, there's wetlands, and there's also impacts to I-91, which we're attempting to avoid. So 3 routes in that area, kind of in the railroad, Pondside Road, I-91 region. So thank you for those questions. And Joe, if you wanted to jump in on anything I might have missed.
Thank you, Rich. One is when you were talking about the easternmost route, you said something 44 point something miles. You actually meant $1 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry about that. So the easternmost route, again, this is the noticed alternative. The longest route, 7.2 miles, and I apologize if I misspoke. That's $44.6 million. That's the project cost, inclusive of the POD. Thanks for that, Joe.
Yep, you bet. And just a little more clarification. Yes, per the DPU, and we are a regulated utility, we would put this into a future rate case. And if deemed prudent, the DPU would allow, that rate to be carried by the ratepayer, and which would be spread across approximately 323,000 current EGMA customers. And that wouldn't be seen in the bills until 2027. One thing I wanted to, Rich, if you can come back, is there was questions earlier about, so one of the numbers is 44, something was 34. I know the folks listening are looking for something consistent, something that we can all agree on, and the different sources too. So some from different documents. Can you just go into that really briefly, how the numbers aren't always going to be the same? They're for different, they come at different times and for different purposes. If you address that just briefly, that'd be great.
Yeah, it is a challenge to really refine our estimate. It's something that we've been working on over time. So we're working to get better accuracy in our estimate, and the numbers have changed. And there were also, in some of the numbers we've reported in the past, some inconsistencies of whether or not we've reported the cost figures inclusive of the POD. And that's something we've decided to, for clarity, we're moving forward going to be inclusive of the POD. So just to reiterate, the numbers as we have now, this is our best estimate as of today, is 34.7 million to, or I'm sorry, I'm gonna correct that. It's 32.5 million as the lowest cost option, and 44.6 million as the highest cost. So again, 32.5 and 44.6. I can't guarantee that the numbers won't change in the future. That's again tied to the market value of steel, our contractor rates that we're getting from potential bidders, as well as some of our historical costs could change. But at this point, we feel that that's our best estimate that we can provide.
Thanks, Rich. Another question we had is in regards to air quality during construction and beyond. So we wanted to address that. If I could ask Matt Waltrip to just respond to that. during construction, and then others can chime in as well.
Yes, Chuck, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity today to answer your questions. My name is Matthew Waldrop. I have not spoken yet, but I handle licensing and permitting for the company. I saw Kimberly had several questions pertaining to the environment, so I was going to actually take those in order, if that's okay. The first part of her question was actually talking about how we plan on reducing our carbon footprint, just in general and as part of the project. And our strategy for reducing our carbon footprint is multifaceted. It includes many things: energy efficiency for our facilities, reducing our fleet emissions. We're installing a lot of electric vehicle charging stations now at our area work centers and at our offices as well. And replacing older natural gas mains, reducing our SF6 emissions from our substations. As most folks know, SF6 is a very potent greenhouse gas, about 20,000 times more powerful than CO2. So we are working to reduce SF6 from our substations. We're also investing in a lot of renewables, like offshore wind. There's several offshore wind projects we have off the coast of New England that we partnered with Ørsted on. And any remaining emissions that we can't get down to zero, we are offsetting those by funding other carbon-friendly programs. The second part of the question talks a little bit, asks about some concerns with stormwater pollution and impacts on nearby perennial streams. So during construction, we utilize best management practices, often referred to as BMPs, and those will help ensure that all material, whether it's spoil or dust, is contained in our project site and that surrounding areas are adequately protected. The BMPs could consist of straw wattles that are staked straw bales, or other procedural controls like utilizing a water truck if it's a dry day, just to make sure that dust levels are contained on site and don't blow off site. The question does mention perennial streams. They are jurisdictional under the State Wetlands Protection Act, federally and locally too. We will need to obtain an order of conditions from the conservation commissions. And the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection will also review our permit applications that are sent to the conservation commissions. So there's a lot of oversight and a lot of review of those applications. As part of our permitting process, we do work with the conservation commissions in the locality on, they review our applications, there's a public hearing, and they will provide us with a permit that lists out conditions that we have to follow during construction to help protect the resource areas. The company, in order to also cover the stormwater piece of the question, the company is developing a stormwater pollution prevention plan that's kept on site and provided to all our crews and to the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. It requires that we have certain BMPs, again, that we have to follow, and requires inspections to occur on a regular basis. And if we note any corrective actions, they have to be addressed either the same day or whatever the permit from the locality specifies. The SWIP, or Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, is kept on site and actually is audited by the EPA. So while we're passing wetlands and streams, perennial streams, the use of the environmental controls, consulting with the regulatory agencies, and also just general oversight during construction will ensure that the wetlands and water bodies are protected. And I saw Kimberly did also have a second question on specific pollution from the POD in Long Meadow. And so construction of the project, when the project is being constructed, will likely result in minor temporary increase in emissions of greenhouse gases from things like just use of conventional equipment powered by either diesel fuel or gasoline engines, similar to the automotives that many people still drive on the road today. Upon completion of the project, any additional greenhouse gas emissions we feel will be very minor, such as the station heater and emergency generator that are needed during power outages. And even if they are utilized, those components are high efficiency. So we feel any increase in greenhouse gas from the project will be minor. And I will also note too, to folks that as part of our filing with the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act office, we will be submitting, we're actually required to submit a robust greenhouse gas analysis that outlines, what protective measures we have for keeping greenhouse gases minimized during construction and ongoing operation. And that is reviewed by the state agencies. MEPA takes public comments on that document, and it can be made available to the public through the MEPA office as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions.
Thanks, Matt. There was an additional question about replacing trees, and I can field that and turn it back to Matt as well. In terms of visual mitigation near the POD, we certainly will work with abutting property owners on a one-on-one basis to with them on their preferred means of visual mitigation. And we've already begun conversations with several of them during our outreach. So we appreciate that question. Matt, anything else you wanted to add on tree clearing in relation to the project?
I think you covered it pretty well, Chuck. We do work with the locality. Any of the local boards or commissions that have an interest in any type of visual screening or tree plantings, we certainly work with them. And as part of our petition to the EFSB, a portion of that petition does consist of, a visual component, visual impacts that would result from the project, and any, measures we would be taking to mitigate that or avoid and minimize to the greatest extent possible. But that does include consultation with Longmeadow and Springfield as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. We did get several other questions in relation to the route, why certain routes were chosen. And I'd like to have someone first clarify the EFSB process and the inclusion of public comment in that process in relation to potential routes. So if someone could touch on that first, and then I will ask the next question that was a bit more specific to why certain routes were not chosen.
Sure, Chuck. And if anyone has any need to jump in on this one, please feel free. But just to touch on what the EFSB process is, as we said earlier, the EFSB is an independent board that's appointed at the state level for evaluating these large-scale energy projects. Things like power plants, things like natural gas storage tanks, pipelines, electric transmission lines. These are all kind of the purview of the EFSB, and their goal is to ensure that the project does indeed satisfy the need for a reliable energy source. But there's also a tremendous focus on balancing the need for reliability with environmental concerns, and environmental also includes human concerns with the residents of the communities. In addition to cost, which is generally cost to the ratepayers. As a component of the process, there is the opportunity for the public or any other organizations to speak up during public hearings, and there is an opportunity to communicate any concerns to the EFSB, and those concerns become a part of the filing, and the EFSB has the right and the opportunity, and very frequently does impose restrictions or alterations or requests for changes with respect to the comments that they do receive from the public. As it relates to the routes, I touched on this earlier, it's a statistical evaluation process. So we look at environmental considerations like wetlands, stream crossings, There's tree clearing that enters into the formula. There's the number of abutters, residences, traffic considerations, and including, you know, the proximity of schools and businesses. So it's a statistical process that it evaluates the routes on a quantitative basis. And the reason why certain routes are rejected, for example, the routes along the western side of Longmeadow, is that after analyzing all of those inputs, the process, which is consistent with EFSB filings that have been submitted in the past, it resulted in these final four as being the ideal routes. And in addition, you know, the location of the POD was also looked at and analyzed, and the final decision of where that POD landed was made by TGP, and also, you know, it included all of these very similar evaluations. So I'll turn it back to you, Chuck. Hopefully, did I miss anything on that?
I don't think so. I think we just wanted to also clarify that the EFSB evaluation will be looking at not just the proposed routes, but the full slate of potential routes and what the analysis was done on those routes.
Absolutely. They're going to trace back the entire methodology, validating all of our inputs and all of our analysis, our formulas and our methods. So that will be validated by the EFSB.
Thanks, Rich. At this point, we have another letter that I'd like to read into the record. We had a few, I should clarify, two letters. I'll read one of them. This one is from the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry of the United States and Canada. And once I finish this, we'll return to Q&As. I am writing this letter in support of the upcoming Eversource proposed reliability gas project for Springfield and Western Massachusetts. I represent over 10,000 plumbers, pipe fitters, sprinkler fitters, and HVAC techs and apprentices from across the state. Realizing that there is a very important discussion about global warming and the effects on the planet, the fact remains that while having a working gas distribution system in place, reliability and safety must be maintained. This project will ensure that a safe and reliable supply will continue while the other technologies come to fruition and provide more viable options that will be available to all of the residential and commercial end users in the areas. Best regards, Harry J. Brett, International Representative, United Association, New England. Thank you for the time to read that. Another question that came in earlier in the chat that I wanted to touch on. Questions regarding the Agawam Gate Station and past issues there, potential failures. If Mark or Rich wanted to just address that.
Sure. So I'm not prepared to discuss the details of the exact details of the operational history of that station, but what I will say is that that station has been in service for many years. It has been rebuilt partially and fully a couple of times now. And the station receives a tremendous amount of maintenance from our technicians on a regular basis. They're frequently inspecting the station for anything from mechanical failure to corrosion to any other issues that might be happening at the station. Similar to our other PODs, I believe we have 5 in the greater Springfield area. All our PODs are monitored, like as we said, for 24/7, 365 days a year for any abnormal operating conditions. And over the years, there have been minor issues at the station that have been corrected over time. It's something that goes along with the regular maintenance of any POD or even any regulator station. It's just normal maintenance. And so, yes, there have been minor projects to fix issues over the years. Recently, we did have a project, a maintenance plant, kind of a planned maintenance project at the Agawam Gate Station that required a tremendous amount of planning and work. It involved partially shutting down the station to remediate an issue on one of the regulator runs. And there was a lot of concern, a lot of planning, careful execution of the project, because it is such a critical facility. There was a very stringent temperature restriction for the work that was taking place. There was just a tremendous amount of planning and contingency planning and preparation work that went into prepping the station as well as other stations in the area for the project. I believe we had it required us to make alterations to 3 or 4 other stations in the area, and even then there was a lot of focus on the safety of the project. So there has been a long history. The station has been operating normally for a very long time. There's no current concerns with the station itself. We're going to continue to maintain it as we always have, but the project itself is structured to address that fundamental need that it is still a single source of supply, and that includes the TGP lateral upstream of the Agawam Gate Station. And the service history, the good service history of that Agawam station is excellent. We want to keep that up and maintain great performance out there, but we can't ignore the fact that while it is a low probability of occurrence, the associated impact would be tremendous. And I can talk a little bit about that now, of what the impact would be of a failure either on the TGP line, the Agawam Gate Station, or the line downstream, even the Memorial Bridge, because haven't had an opportunity to really get into that yet today. So I'll talk a little bit about what the customer impact would be of a failure should it occur. For the purposes of planning, we look at incidents that occur during cold weather. These are periods where our customers have the highest levels of reliance on our system, primarily for heat. Customers use the natural gas product to heat their homes, keep their families warm in the coldest days of the winter. And in events where there are service interruptions, the impacts are tremendous, significant. We touched on it earlier. It's 58,000 customers impacted if this sort of an event would occur during some of the coldest winter days of the year. Just to elaborate on what's behind the 58,000 customer number, it includes multifamily residences. It includes families that have more than 2 people. So on average, we've calculated that 58,000 customers is equivalent to about 200 200,000 people. So an incident like this would be an unprecedented situation. It's something that we've never experienced before in our industry, and certainly in New England. But again, it's a low probability of occurrence, but a tremendously high impact. And so that's why there's a lot of interest at Eversource in shoring up this reliability concern. So what would happen in the event of 200,000 people no longer being able to cook, no longer being able to heat their homes in the winter? We've consulted our emergency management team within Eversource to kind of get some better insight on what something like that would look like. And we've determined that an incident of this scale would certainly involve the activation of full activation of the state Massachusetts emergency management team, as well as the federal emergency management team. And we also believe that an incident of this scale would require support from the National Guard. So when our customers can no longer heat their homes in the winter, whether it's a small scale outage or a tremendously large scale outage like this, our technicians are required to make 2 trips to the location. The first trip would be to shut down the customer and make the customer's equipment safe. And then we would be required to make any potential repairs that might be necessary. But we do anticipate that in order to shut down 58,000 customers, it would take upwards of 8 to 10 days just to get the system shut down. And then following the shutdown of all 58,000 customers, the resulting restoration would take between 1 to 2 months. So that's just a tremendous duration of time. And for that duration, our customers would need to find some form of shelter for themselves and for their families. So they would need to travel to a remote location, most likely a hotel, could be in the surrounding area, but with 200,000 people, we're looking at a significant travel time for hotels across the state or even across state lines in Connecticut and maybe other states in the area like New York and New Hampshire, Vermont. So there's a transportation requirement, there's a housing requirement, and in a situation like this, the National Guard would be instrumental in assisting us in supporting our customers. There's also a distribution of food and water that goes along with this. When we have a disruption of this kind, the grocery stores are impacted, the restaurants are impacted, and it becomes a significant event or a significant challenge to meet the the minimum necessities for supporting your family. Just talking about the communities impacted, I'll go through the list. It is 7 communities impacted. We have Agawam, Chicopee, East Longmeadow, Southwick, Springfield, and West Springfield. The most significant impact is Springfield. We just have a tremendous concentration of residential customers in Springfield. And so that's 7 communities total impacted by such an event, 4 of which are, in fact, environmental justice communities. Obviously, Springfield being the largest EJ community in the area, but also including Agawam, West Springfield, and Chicopee. And there is, I believe, a small EJ community in Southwick as well. So this project is really aimed at addressing just that tremendous need, the tremendous potential impact of a situation like this. It is a component of our regular safety-oriented processes. We're involved in GSEP, replacements of aging infrastructure. We're involved in systematic improvements to our regulator stations and gate stations. And we also have a new safety assessment program that's that Eversource is implementing. And I can turn it over to you, Mark, if you want to talk more about the safety assessment.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Yeah, there was a question about the safety assessment that was done at Eversource. And, as you know, in October of 2020, as we transitioned Columbia Gas over to Eversource, there was a DPU requirement for us to do a safety assessment of the system. We spent about 6 months internally developing that plan, which the plan was submitted to the Department of Public Utilities on September 1st of 2021. It was filed. We will be having to report out to the department every 6 months on progress. So the plan, has been really reviewed very carefully by the DPU, and we will be giving report out status on that and the progress. Just a little bit about the safety assessment is the areas of focus that we looked at were really taking into 3 buckets. One was looking at our primary assets, meaning taking a look at our gate stations throughout the system, our pipelines, our meters, also our SCADA system and maps and records. Looking at all of those to see where, there are improvements that we can make to, enhance safety, of the system. Looking at also key programs like our gas supply program, reliability, our training program of our employees, certainly a very important piece, leak survey practices, and also our pipeline safety management systems. And the third bucket was looking at compliance and recommendations. So as we looked at this safety assessment, we wanted to make sure that we were, looking at our code compliance, making sure we're exceeding code compliance, and also looking at reports such as dynamic risk to make sure that we were in line with that. So that's a little bit of an overview about the safety assessment program. It will continue through 2028. So it's a program that will go on multi-years and again, be reported to the DPU on that. Back to you, Chuck.
Great, thank you, Mark. Joe, wanted to call on you. We had some questions about the statements that were read in, just some clarification on that, on why that was done and future opportunities for public input.
Exactly. Thank you, Chuck. We had a question from Kathy saying after the union statement was read, she didn't know there would be an opportunity. And to be perfectly honest, Kathy and others, that wasn't the format or the intent of the open houses. The open house was for Eversource to showcase the project, the scope, and why we're doing it, and for people to ask questions. However, Select Board Chair Mark Strange asked if he could read a statement, and we wanted, and since that is a governing body in one of the 2 towns that this project will be constructed anyway, it's going to benefit 7, but construction will be in 2. We wanted to accommodate that, so we read the letter from the Select Board on both occasions. When it was read last night, other, let's call them bodies or concerned people, wanted to have their letters read as well. So out of the 2 that were submitted, we read one. It's pretty representative, but I put up on the screen our contact information. And as I said earlier in the presentation, this is just the beginning of the process. So Kathy and others, please, use our email address, use our phone number, and let us know how you feel. But also in the EFSB process, there's going to be multiple opportunities for, if the impacts of COVID subside, in person, being able to have your voices heard, written or virtual. So this is just the beginning. There'll be more opportunity with very formal statements if you so choose. So I just want to bring that forward. It's also a good opportunity to once again put our contact information slide up so that folks know how to get a hold of us and let us know what you think about the project. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Joe. Another question that came in earlier that I wanted addressed. Is the pipeline capable of carrying a hydrogen natural gas mix, and can current infrastructure, is the current infrastructure capable of carrying such mix? If we could call on Nikki Bruno to respond to that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chuck, and appreciate that question. There are pilots ongoing with hydrogen blending in the natural gas distribution systems, national or internationally. We still have a bit of R&D to do on the hydrogen space, but yes, the new pipes being installed would be compatible with blending hydrogen. Again, as the system operator, we certainly have to consider all assets, fittings, down to the regulator station, the pipes, all in concert to make sure that blending in hydrogen is safe and reliable with the current methane mix. But we do see some interesting kind of future looking opportunities, potentially with our offshore wind capacity coming online and potentially having excess capacity that could be potentially utilized as green hydrogen. So no emissions, but that's a little bit down the road. And as a near-term solution, I know that question was a little bit focused more on hydrogen, but certainly renewable natural gas, which could be carbon negative actually, could be transported today in the assets that we're putting in. So we're working through again some of those transitional issues through the Future of Gas proceeding to see what makes best sense for the system, both from a physical perspective and also from a policy perspective. And that would be able to be implemented here if that is one of the pathways or one of the suites of options that we pursue. And one last thing I just wanted to hit off on, because I know there was a question, Chuck, around supply and growth. I mean, certainly the Tennessee pipeline, if that was to be providing incremental or expansion volumes, which it's not in this case, we would have to go before our regulator, the Department of Public Utilities, and be filing signed contracts with the interstate pipeline, which we're not. This is a reliability project, and as was discussed further, even things like hydrogen, putting a different type of supply mix into the pipeline doesn't address the reliability need today and at present. So we look forward to thinking about transitioning to the future energy mix, but in the meantime, the reliability still remains needed today. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Nikki. One other question that came up, a topic that came up multiple times, was expansion. Why wasn't the East Longmeadow station expanded as an option or an alternative? Rich, if you could just address that.
Sure. We've done an evaluation of the East Longmeadow site as a component of our research into the POD location alternatives. And the results of our analysis at our East Longmeadow POD is that the existing station just simply cannot accommodate the additional facilities. It has an existing POD on site that has very similar equipment to what we're proposing in Longmeadow. And it also has some wetlands surrounding the site. So it's been determined to be infeasible, mostly tied to the available footprint at the site. I will add that the resulting pipeline project leading from the East Longmeadow station to the Bliss Street station would be approximately 114% longer than what we're proposing with our 4 routes. So it's over twice as long of a pipeline installation, which comes with a tremendous cost and a tremendous impact to additional abutters along the route. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks. So we've gone a bit over time here, so that the following will be the the last question, and then I'll have some brief closing remarks. We did have some questions about additional work Eversource is doing while this proposed project is being evaluated. Are there other, improvements to the existing line or other improvements Eversource is working on to improve reliability? So if I could call on Mark to address that before we close.
Thank you, Chuck. Yeah, I would like to talk just a couple of minutes on some improvements that we're making here at Eversource for continual operational excellence. The first category I'd like to talk about is one we're very proud of. The team has worked on one of our, as Matt talked about earlier, one of our carbon footprint reduction components is leak reduction. And when we did day one operations, October 9th of 2020, we had in the city of Springfield, we had 126 class 2 leaks. Today, we have 9 open class 2 leaks. We have 0 class 3 emitters. If you look at the district as a whole, last year in October 9th of 2020, we had 184 leaks in the entire district. We're now down to 28. It really shows how hard the team has worked and the commitment towards improving safety. And as we know, we reduce class 2 leaks. Those don't become class 1s during adverse weather conditions and, create safety issues. So risk reduction is great. It's great for the community. It's something really the team's worked very, very, very hard on. In the whole district, we have no class 3 emitters. Again, it's our effort towards reducing emissions and something that we are going to continue to focus on. We're also looking at, ways that we can improve our assets, make our assets more reliable. As Rich talked about earlier, maintenance, we've really stepped up our maintenance programs to make sure that we're, performing inspections on our equipment and making sure operating is, operation performance is tops and ready for the winter season. The other piece that I'll talk about, the third piece, which is really important, is our employees, is really making sure that our employees are trained at a very high level. That's something that we did when we started day one operations. We made a conscious decision to reoperate or qualify every employee from Columbia Gas under the Eversource program. Gave us a chance to, reset employees with some additional training, get everybody on the same standards for the whole company, and really made a nice step improvement for our team. So again, very focused on our customers, on the communities, working with our public officials. We've also done a lot with really getting out there and reaching out to the towns and the cities to really talk about how we impact their communities, how we can improve restoration after we do construction work. So a lot of facets out there that we're really pushing hard. And the last thing that I will mention, and this is a personal thing, but also for the team, is, as, our fuel choices and, really looking at how we look for the future of the environment and, improving our environment. It's a great learning experience from us to hear from you and, understand, future choices that could be coming our way. Eversource is an energy company. Gas is a piece of it, but we really want to look at the whole picture, learn, see how we can look at the future and, come up with the best win-win for all of us here. So with that, I just wanted to thank everybody for listening to us about the project today. And we really appreciate your time and look forward to talking soon. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Mark. And that concludes our second open house. Again, Joe has put up our contact information. As Mark mentioned, we look forward to hearing from you further about this proposed project. I'd like to thank everyone for attending both today and last night's virtual open houses and for the excellent questions that were asked. I'd also like to thank our 2 interpreters who worked diligently both last night and today to ensure that those that speak Spanish were able to participate in both of our open houses. So again, thank you for participation, and we look forward to continuing to hear from you. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Thank you.